Welcome, everyone. In this video, we're going to be ranking the board clears that are available in the Vibes TCG. Before we start, let's talk a little bit about what a board clear is. Now, a board clear can also have lots of different names in different card games, or even what different people call them. They also could call them board wipes or even area of effect spells. So the idea behind a board clear is that it's a action that can, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be an action. I guess it's an effect that can basically remove multiple penguins at the same time. And a board clear doesn't care how many penguins there are. So, for example, it would be something that says something like ice all penguins. And so it doesn't matter if there's one penguin, four penguin, or five penguin. So this is different than a single target removal or a multi-target removal that might say like, for example, like Peace Out Penguin says ice up to two penguins, or something like Adventure Squad ices a single penguin. So a board clear is a really great for slow controlling decks because what a board clear can do is it can let your opponent develop a lot faster than you. And then it's kind of that like equalizing tool in order to get you back onto the board. Because, right, they might have six penguins, but you only have two penguins. But then you play a board clear. Now everyone has zero penguins. And then you can kind of restart the game. Then I think there's another really important aspect of board clear, which is the difference between a just like symmetrical and non-symmetrical board clear. So a symmetrical board clear would be something that affects both your side of the board and your opponent's side of the board, whereas a non-symmetrical board clear would be something that only affects one side of the board. In the first set of the Vibes TCG, all board clears are symmetrical. So this means we don't really have the concept of a non-symmetrical board clear yet, which I'm sure will be developed in later sets. The second thing I want to talk about with this conceptual is a conditional board clear. So, right, a non conditional board clear would just say ice all penguins. So that just doesn't like care about what the penguins are like. But a conditional board clear might say something like ice all penguins, which are yellow, or ice all penguins with a vibe of four or greater. And so a conditional board clear is a lot more, you can build a lot better deck strategies around them because you can kind of tune your deck to deal with the conditionality of the board clear. However, in the first set of the Vibes TCG, we also, almost all the board clears, but not all of them, are basically symmetric, unconditional board clears. So, like right now, the set is pretty limited on what we can do with board clears. However, right, let's still talk about this. I think this is going to become a much more interesting topic for discussion as we add more and more cards to the game. The other thing that makes board clear so powerful is that they are just card advantage engines. So, right, because when you play a board clear, let's say you have three penguins on your side of the board and your opponent has six or seven, right? Then the board clear itself means you end up getting a card advantage of seven minus three plus one because you need to play the board clear. So it ends up being like a plus three card advantage. And so because you know you're going to play the board clear, you can start setting up for it turns in advance. And so this kind of effect will result in board clears often being very good card advantage for you. So, like, that really enables you to kind of like play back, play slow, and then play the board clear, and then really flip the game in terms of tempo and card advantage. Now, one of the dangers with this type of strategy is not every other deck actually is trying to play wide on the board. So it can be really good in some matchups, but there are other ones where this kind of doesn't really end up working out that well as an approach. So as we go through the different board clears, we're going to assess them on a few different elements. So the first one is just what is the actual effect of it? So we already talked about that, like symmetric or non-symmetric and conditional or non-conditional. Then it's how easy is it to actually play it? Like what are the costs and conditions required to play the board clear? Because right, like it can be an amazing board clear, but if it's really hard to actually play it, it's going to be difficult to get to have an impact with it. And then the last factor is what is the supporting cards around the board clear? Because a board clear on its own doesn't actually do anything. Like, right, I mean, it'll clear the board, but you still have to somehow win the game. So it really like the board clears that are the strongest right now are the ones that have a really good supporting cast around them within their colors. So, okay, so let's get started. The first board clear we're going to talk about is the board clear from the green color, which is Too Cool for School. So now, Too Cool for School costs three pudge, and it basically says you can only play this action if there's a penguin in your huddle vibing more than your opponent's highest penguin by six or more. This board clear is in green, which has a lot of big penguins, so it's definitely possible to meet this condition. However, one of the big drawbacks with this condition is while it's possible to meet it, like against some amount of decks, there are other decks that also play big penguins. So you can end up in a situation where, like, against like a Bunkus or something like that, where you can't even play this card. Secondly, like the condition is a little counterintuitive because the way vibes works, right? If you have the penguin that's vibing the highest, then you win the vibe check. And so then you're kind of like ahead on tempo. So this board clear can only be played when you're in that situation where you're ahead on tempo. Now, right, I think this is really meant to be part of some sort of combo green type deck where you like temporarily boost up your penguins, or you maybe you do something like you have a what's that penguin with great mystique, which can't actually win the vibe check, and you combo it with that. But overall, I found it very difficult to use this card. I've tried to build some like really slow green controlling decks or those combo green controlling decks, and even in those decks, this card just isn't very good because like as you're trying to build up this win condition, you end up kind of icing your own win condition. The other big challenge with this card is, right, for a board clear to be successful, after the board clear happens, right, you need to be able to like play a lot of cards to like reclaim the empty board. But green just really doesn't have a lot of good card draw. Like green gets its card advantage through cards like Luca Saves the Penguins or something like Ornate Swordsman. So it has all their card advantage actually comes from being on the board. So like, and if you're already getting your card advantage by having a lot of penguins on the board, then why are you clearing the board? So overall, this card, I think, right, maybe it'll have its moment in the sun later, but for now, I think it's not very good, and therefore it goes into tier D. The next board clear is the board clear from red, and we're talking about a drop of attention. So for a drop of attention, it also has this condition, which says you can only play it if it's the fourth action of the cycle. And it's also symmetrical ice all penguins. This one only costs one red pudge, so that's pretty good. So it's definitely the cheapest board clear, and I think this card has a lot of potential because of that. However, the condition is just extremely onerous because having to play it as the exact fourth action card in the cycle means that, right, one of the things the way like red decks work is you actually end up like playing a lot of actions to dig for the answer. But you can't really dig for this as your answer because, like, right, say you're just having Mega Penguin out, you're drawing a bunch of cards. Well, you've already gone past your fourth action. So you really need to have this in your hand early in your turn so you can plan around it. And even though it's only one pudge, right, you're going to have to play three actions before it. So both of those things make it very difficult to play. The other thing that's kind of difficult with it is red really likes like the playstyle that I really find gravitating towards with red is this like kind of like tempo board control deck where you have a lot of cards that get a little card advantage and you kind of just control the board by just slowly removing your opponent's penguins and doing all these like little micro actions to slowly build up an advantage over time. But a drop of intention just completely wipes out your board that you've been slowly building up. So it really doesn't like work well with the game plan of red, in my opinion. Now, this board clear does come in the red starter deck, so it's very easy for everyone because all the board clears are rares. And so, like, you could say, like, oh, well, the reason people don't play them is because they don't have access to them. But a drop of attention, everyone has access to because it's in the red starter deck. And I literally, in my entire time of playing this game, no one has ever played this card against me, and I've tried to make it work in decks, and whenever I'm building a red deck, it's always the first card I remove. There's one other saving grace of this card, which is that it can like red does have some very marginal tooling to work with board clears because right, Trust Fall says whenever you play Trust Fall, reduce the vibe of a penguin by 2. If its vibe is 0, it can't be removed. So like if you had a wizard penguin, you play Trust Fall, you get its vibe to 0, then it can't be iced that cycle, and then you play Drop of Attention, you can end up with a wizard penguin on the board at the end of like doing that action. However, whenever you're like that interaction by itself just is not sufficient of a support network to really make this card work. However, I could see maybe over time if a lot more of those type of interactions were introduced to the game, then maybe a drop of attention could be good. But so taking all these factors into account, I still think that this card, at least in the current metagame, is not very good at all, and therefore it's going to go into tier D. The next board clear is the one conditional board clear that we currently have available, and that is Teleporter Penguin. So now Teleporter Penguin is different than all the other board clears because it's not actually an action. It's a penguin. And what it says is it says at the start of your turn, ice all penguins with vibe or 4 or less. This penguin can't have vibe counters placed on it. Now, the not allowing vibe counters to be placed on it is a very good addition because otherwise you could just put vibe counters on it and it would just would stay alive through its own kind of removal spell, through its own board clear. But overall, I think this card has a few challenges. So, first of all, it is very expensive. 7 fish. There's not a lot of decks that can support a 7 fish penguin. And then the second thing is, like, right, when you play Teleporter Penguin, two things happen. One, your opponent can actually react to it. The other board clears kind of go on the stack, and short of Spring a Leak, there's nothing anyone can do about it. Besides maybe like react by like trying to draw some cards or maybe do that like Trust Fall play to protect their penguins. But with Teleporter Penguin, they can just remove it. So if they like have a Not Your Keys or a Sunburner Penguin, like there's so many different things that they could do in order to remove the Teleporter Penguin to prevent it from triggering. The other thing is, right, because you play it, assuming you have the Baron, which generally, if you're playing a deck that has 7 fish available, you will have the Baron. So let's say that you have the Baron, and then you play it, your opponent can just react to it by not playing anything. And so they basically have a whole turn to set up to play around your Teleporter Penguin. So that also can kind of lead to suboptimal outcomes. That being said, unlike the other two board clears we talked about, this card is almost good enough to make it into a deck. So the Caffeine Green Mega Penguin deck, I played this card in that deck. I ended up cutting it, but it like was almost good enough to make it into that deck. So the reason that it was good in that deck is the Caffeine Green Mega Penguin deck doesn't play any actions, and it does struggle against a yellow aggressive deck. So like Teleporter Penguin is a tech, like if you were playing just exclusively yellow against yellow aggressive, you would be probably playing Teleporter Penguin in one of the tech slots. So overall, I have actually played this card and it has won me games, which is different than the other two. So that's why it's going to go into tier C. The next board clear is a board clear that also, like Teleporter Penguin, is like almost good enough to be playable in some decks in certain situations. And I'm, of course, referring to the purple board clear, which is Spring Break. So, Spring Break is the purple board clear, costs 4 pudge, and it says you can only play this action if you have 15 or more cards in your ice all penguins. So, I personally have used this as a tech card in a kind of like more slow rangey Bismo deck, and also, I've had this card played against me a few times from Bismo decks. So it's definitely good enough to be played in certain decks, and it is being used very rarely, but still being used. The one thing that makes this card challenging to play is for most purple decks, getting to 15 cards in your ice is actually kind of challenging. Like, especially because any sort of more like mid-rangey purple deck is gonna play Have a Philosophical Debate and Bunkus and play the Bunkus more not as like the final win condition, but just kind of like as a tempo card. And so if you're having both of those cards in your deck, your ice actually gets smaller over time. So I find that when I'm playing purple, my ice is usually between 6 and 14 cards. And so Spring Break can be really hard to pull off, especially against an aggressive deck, which is just, you don't have that much time to do it. So, and it's 4 pudge. 4 pudge is a lot. Like, in order to play 4 pudge for a purple deck, which doesn't have that many like Pudge producing extra penguins, you're probably having to play Wizard Penguin, and Wizard Penguin is very fragile and easily removed. So overall, I do think that this also has seen some play. It is still the condition is very hard to meet, and the other thing is purple. So when you think about like what support network does purple have for board clear? Purple doesn't have any direct cards that work with board clears, but it does have cards that like having a big ice. And so, like, right, you clear the board, and then after the board, maybe you get some penguin who break the fourth wall, cooking penguin, bunkus, like quickly to repopulate the board like that. So it does have a better support network than green or red for sure, but it's still not like there's still not like an obvious deck really that can be built around this board clear. So because of that, this card is also going into the C tier. The next board clear is the board clear that is by far played the most and that most people will be aware of, and that like new players, it's one of the cards that just like really blows their mind. And I'm referring to Yum Yum. So Yum Yum is the yellow board clear, and it is the simplest of all of them. It has no conditions. It just says ice all penguins. But it does cost 5 yellow pudge. So overall, when you think about this, like the 5 pudge is kind of a condition. It's one of the most expensive actions there is in the game. However, it is really nice that there are no additional conditions beyond the pudge cost. The thing that makes this card so strong right now is not really the card itself, although, right, the lack of conditions is nice. But it's really the deck it goes in. So first of all, yellow of any color has the least amount of problem getting to 5 Pudge. So it has not only Wizard Penguin, but also Pot Stirring Penguin. So it has two of these Pudge producing penguins. And in general, yellow just has a lot of small penguins. So you can just really quickly like build out a board with yellow. And then right, Yum Yum is very easy to play. Like I very rarely, whenever I'm playing Yum Yum, have trouble meeting the 5 Pudge condition. The other thing is yellow just actually has some really, really good support cards to play this kind of deck completely focused on Yum Yum. So I'm referring to Lucky Penguin. So Lucky Penguin says basically when this penguin goes in the ice, take a penguin with vibe 2 or less from your ice and put it into play. So you can have a Lucky Penguin on the board, you play Yum Yum, Yum Yum resolves, and then all of a sudden you still get another penguin on the board afterwards. So it enables you to keep control of the board while playing Yum Yum. So that's one card. And then the other one is Penguin Who Doesn't Mind Goodbyes. And what Penguin Who Doesn't Mind Goodbyes says is whenever a different yellow penguin is put into the ice, draw a card. So you can imagine a situation where you have a penguin that doesn't mind goodbyes, a lucky penguin, and like 3 other yellow penguins. You play Yum Yum, you clear the entire board, but then you're going to basically draw 4 cards because your lucky penguin and your 3 other yellow penguins go into the ice, and you get one of those penguins back with lucky penguin. So overall, you've just made this like absolutely game-winning play. So because of that, like yellow is really, really good at supporting Yum Yum. So therefore, Yum Yum is going to go into tier A. Our final board clear is the one from blue, and that is Send It Too Hard. So what Send It Too Hard says is you can only play this action if your opponent has 15 or more penguins in their ice, 15 more cards in their ice all penguins. So Send It Too Hard costs 2 Pudge, which is just insane. So like it is just so easy to fit this in Pudge wise. And so although blue is not like a powerhouse for producing Pudge, right? You never have any problem finding 2 Pudge to play to Send It Too Hard. And what also makes Send It Too Hard so powerful is it just works really well with the blue deck. Unlike Yum Yum, which requires supporting cards to be out on the board that your opponent can interact with, right? Like, say you have the penguin that doesn't mind goodbyes, you play Yum Yum, they can respond by icing your penguin who doesn't mind goodbyes to prevent that condition from activating. Send It Too Hard, the condition is just inherent in the blue deck of how it works. Because, right, with the blue deck, you're just trying to ice all of your opponent's cards, and Send It Too Hard just keeps resetting the board. So you reset the board, and so that just like makes the game go on for a few more turns. And those few more turns are the turns you need to just keep icing away their cards. So there's no like specific card you need to have on the board, but it's just the like inherent strategy of the deck just works so well with Send It Too Hard. Now, the condition itself, I do think that this is one of the slight drawbacks of this card because you can like getting 15 is doable, but it's just not automatic. So unlike Yum Yum, where like getting to 5 Pudge is yellow is pretty much automatic, with blue, you do need to like really focus on getting to 15 cards. But that being said, right, it is definitely possible to do. Also, Send It Too Hard is definitely all over the meta right now, just like Yum Yum. Because of this, I'm going to put Send It Too Hard into tier S. So that completes our board clear ranking. As you can see, there's basically like 2 board clears that are good and 4 that are pretty much not good right now. And the 2 that are good, I'm definitely open to debate on how they should be categorized. And same with the other 2 buckets, but there's definitely 2 distinct buckets. That concludes this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this type of content, don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to be updating this board clear tier list. Like if there's going to be any big changes in the meta where these rankings might change, like a new deck gets discovered, or maybe right when the new set comes, we'll definitely be redoing this with all of the new board clears and kind of comparing them to each other. Because when the new set comes out, right, some of these board clears that are ranked low right now, right, there might be a perfect deck that's discovered or more support cards created for them that then all of a sudden makes them really good. So just because you're low on the list now doesn't mean you're not eventually going to become a strong card. All right, until next time, thanks everyone.